Welcome to Just a Parishioner. I'm Lorenz and
I'm Sean Grilli.
Thanks for downloading today's episode. All of our episodes are available on Apple Podcast and Spotify and YouTube as well. We got a good show for you today. Sean, what are we going to be talking about today?
We're going to be talking about pop culture, really Stranger Things, TV. If you guys like TV, you've probably heard of Stranger Things.
Right.
And we'll mix Catholicism in there somewhere.
Just a little bit in there.
And we're going to try not to spoil too much, but we're going to have to something. I don't know.
It's really not going to be a lot.
Yeah.
But this came up because my wife and I just finished the last season of Stranger Things. We're a little behind.
And I think you guys were the last ones on Earth.
See, you say that, but now you just insulted a bunch of people who are like, oh, I'm only 3 episodes in. So,
well, really, I mean, honestly, this is like a little divide between our culture of the people who have 4 children versus the people who have no children.
There you go. You guys finished in 2 days.
Yeah, I think we might have done less.
The last episodes weren't even out and you finished in 2 days. That's impressive.
We found the Stranger Things and we watched it.
So, I mean, my wife and I, we canceled Netflix for like a year and a half or 2 years. And then Stranger Things came out. Like, we'll re-get it. And then now I'm going to cancel it again until Stranger Things comes out again. So
it's like the only thing worth watching anyway.
But it's awesome. But then I find other stuff and I'm like, oh, I forgot that I like watching this and this, but I got to cut it out now.
It's true. Lorenz, love the shirt.
Yep. Let's, so if you're watching on YouTube, it says, want a taco about Jesus. It's one of my favorite shirts.
And I only bring that up because if you're not watching on YouTube, then you're going to miss out on a great shirt.
Exactly. Switch over to YouTube.
Let us pray.
Yeah, let us pray. So great show for you coming up. But why? So again, Stranger Things, minor spoiler alerts. I mean, really like nothing too crazy that we're going to be spoiling, but a lot of themes going on within that show. So if you did watch it, you'll pick up on it. If you haven't seen it yet, still a worthwhile episode to listen to, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen it, the whole like premise of the whole show, like what is it, 4 seasons in now?
Yeah, 4 seasons.
Yeah, so it's like these children start having these almost like supernatural or paranormal encounters, and one of the kids goes missing at one point in the first season, and then they run into these like essentially like demonic creatures that are like wreaking havoc on this small town in Indiana. And it's all set in like the late 70s initially, and then into the 80s. And maybe we'll get into the 90s next season. I'm hopeful we'll get a little like Nirvana going or like grunge, It took me a second to think of the band name, but yeah, so that's kind of the whole thing. And then it kind of develops of like where these creatures are coming from. And then they kind of have this whole upside down world where it's like a different dimension that's like the opposite of the world above that we all live in. So.
Right. And at that point, we really haven't spoiled anything that you don't find out in the first couple of episodes of the first season, really.
Right.
But the reason why we bring up this episode in particular is that the antagonist has, again, supernatural powers. And Sean, you thought there was a very big link with, let's call it an antagonist in our own world, right?
Yeah,
so,
I did.
Yeah. So, why don't you dive into it? This actually was your idea, so I'd love to hear your premise of where Stranger Things really falls into our faith.
Yeah. So, we were texting about it earlier today, which kind of made me kind of think about it. And so we're just very last second with coming up with podcast episode themes sometimes. But today, like just thinking about that topic, like, in the most recent season of Stranger Things, the antagonist, like Lorenz said, who's kind of seems like the mastermind to some degree of everything that's been happening. Although we don't actually know that yet, but he's like wreaking havoc on the citizens of this town, Hawkins, Indiana, right? And at least initially, we see the first person who's kind of like being tortured is this cheerleader. Her name is Chrissy. And we don't really know what's wrong with her for the first episode or so, maybe the second episode. I forget which one we find out, but we kind of see her like she's this popular girl at school and has a ton of friends. And it's like her boyfriend is like the captain of the basketball team. And it's kind of like the it girl in the school, it kind of seems like. But then she starts showing a lot of signs of like being extremely nervous and anxious and like freaking out, and it ends up that she's trying to like buy drugs to like calm herself down. So she goes to this guy who's a drug dealer, who becomes a pretty main character in the season, and tries to buy drugs from him. And then this evil character kind of makes himself known to her and eventually, actually, I don't know if this is a spoiler, but kills her. You'll find that out in like 1 or 2 episodes. So sorry, I spoiled that one. But that's kind of how it goes. But then you kind of uncover like why she's being tortured and like what allowed her to be accessed in like a way that she could be tortured. I forget exactly. It was like a mental health thing. What exactly was going on with her?
It was, I think it was an eating disorder that she may have had.
Yeah.
But you know, the whole correlation to what we're talking about today is this antagonist is really digging into his victim's deepest, darkest fears that only they know about, right?
Yep.
And so again, I don't think that's too much spoiling, and we'll leave it at that for the time being. But I think that's obviously
and the things that they haven't told other people about, right? It's like they it's very much like leaning on the mental health crisis in some degree in that way, but like mental health, just a very popular thing and these days to talk about, and rightfully so. But like we see it relationally. I think the reason we're talking about it is like this evil character that is kind of hidden from the world, but takes control of people's lives when they have something horrible that is eating away at their souls, and they don't talk to anybody about it, and they have nowhere to go with it except for like inside, and they just try to hide it away most of the time or run away from it. Or seek something to distract themselves from it. But ultimately, it's like the thing that's there is going to consume you if you don't find an outlet for it to some degree. Now, in the spiritual realm, it's like, well, we actually have something. We have a name for that.
Yeah.
It's called Satan.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
It's called like the evil spirit that still makes itself manifest in the world around us.
Right. And I mean, the parallel there is, to your point, somebody who isn't reaching out to anybody around them, but they harvest it inside of them. Well, guess what? He knows our deepest and darkest fears, even though we haven't expressed it to anybody. So there's gigantic parallels there. And I mean, that's essentially the link. And that's why we thought it was relevant to talk about tonight.
Right. So like getting into that, it's like, I think everyone here listening, and probably definitely the two of us in this room, can kind of like thinking about the moments of our lives where we were like mired in sin, even if we didn't necessarily recognize it as sin at the time for, whatever stage of life or whatever. And it's like you were mired in sin, and that like part of you knew that it didn't agree with who you are at the root of it. But at the same time, like it's almost tempting to let that become who you are because of the sense that like you've done it and there's no way around it. Like Satan takes full advantage of that. Like Satan, the reason Satan tempts us away from God and away from the good is because he knows the power that can have over us if we never relinquish ourselves to God and allow his love and mercy into our lives. That's how Satan operates. He wants to distract us from good in the world. He wants to distract us from truth in the world and like steer us away from the things that are actually going to give us life. And ultimately, like if he does a good enough job and we never, open our eyes or open our hearts to like the way that God wants us to live our lives, then all that leads to is like actual spiritual death. And that's what hell is. So like in Stranger Things, like this guy, this evil spirit character thing is taking over people's minds and actually like physically breaking their bones and like killing them. And like spiritually, that's exactly what Satan does to us in some degree.
Right. And something that I think that you spoke about very briefly is the fact that we don't see what's going on. We don't see him. Like it's easy to point out enemies. It's easy to point out terrorists when they have a face, right? But it's not easy to point out the enemy that you can't see. Mm-hmm. And he does such a great job. And again, this is his biggest win, right? His biggest win is when he convinces you that he doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. And in a grander scheme of things, and what's happening a lot in our culture is he's convincing an entire culture, like the entire world, that he doesn't exist.
Right.
And the second that happens, the second that we don't recognize that Satan is around us, tempting us every single day, and when we try to place blame in other avenues. Now, again, there are other avenues to blame, but everything behind that is Satan.
Yeah. Yeah. I think about like in the show, like they go on like this manhunt for the drug dealer kid who's also part of this Dungeons and Dragons club called the Hellfire Club. So like a lot of things leading you to believe that this kid is like a demon praiser and like is doing Ouija boards to summon evil spirits and all this different stuff. And he like, people believe he put like a curse on the town. So there's this whole town-wide manhunt going on for this kid, Eddie, in the show, when realistically, like he had nothing to do with the reason this girl died or why other people in the show go through what they go through. It's all this like dark force that is unseeable or unknowable, like at first glance. So like you said, like in our lives, I mean, we attribute so much stuff to things of the world, so much evil and suffering. We like have to have this like scientific mindset or rationalistic mindset of like, why is this happening? Like we're going to get to the bottom of it. But realistically, like, yes, like there are probably physical causes for a lot of things or, whatever causes, but like evil is present in the world because of one factor. And that was, human sin tempted away from God because of Satan. Like, and from the beginning, we see that. So it's kind of like a very strong parallel there, I think, too. And we are so easily taken advantage of when we turn away from God. And we're so easily distracted from what's actually taking advantage of us when we turn away from God.
Yeah. I mean, it goes to this, you said it, turning away from God, because if it weren't for Satan, we'd be united with him forever, for all eternity. It goes back to, like you said, Genesis, right? And I mean, another thing that he does, and one thing that I need to kind of concentrate on also is, if I'm not recognizing that he is behind the temptation, behind the sin, then I'm not actively trying to get closer to God to get away from him, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, there are other reasons why we should be trying to get to God, but one reason is, hey, like the closer I get to God, the more I can ask for his help to protect me from Satan as well.
100%. Yeah, it's like, I mean, you may have heard the word spiritual warfare,
yeah,
right? And if you're listening, you may have heard that. Like, Lorenz, what is spiritual warfare in your words?
Spiritual warfare, I mean, we're talking about the unknown. We're talking about things that you can't see. And that's essentially, I mean, you know what warfare is. It's a battle. Mm-hmm. And that battle's going on within every single one of us. I think that battle is going on as a whole. I think there are leaders in this battle. I think our clergy can be great leaders in this battle. But there's, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a grand scheme battle, but it's also a battle within ourselves.
Yeah, I think primarily it takes place in every human being's heart and soul.
Right.
Like obviously there is like the grand scheme of like humanity and, God trying to draw humanity closer to him and Satan trying to draw humanity away. But like that only happens person to person. So like, yeah, I think it's like every day in our lives, there are good forces and bad forces at work that we cannot see or sense. Intelligent beings like angels that are fallen and angels that are in alignment with God. And those fallen angels, the devils and the demons that we, think about with like these evil creatures with horns and gargoyles and all that kind of stuff. But like realistically, they are forces that are trying to actively turn us away from God day to day. And that's like you said, like we need to find ways to turn towards God so that we're not taken in by the temptations from those forces.
And the thing is, it's very easy. I mean, especially in this, we live in a world where we watch television shows, fiction, right? We watch a lot of sci-fi these days as well. So it's when we're talking about demons and angels and spiritual warfare, it's easy to get pulled into this mentality that, oh, well, you know what? It's like, well, it's basically just another TV show. That's what's going on. It's all fiction to help interpret what's actually going inside of us. It's like, no, actually, no. Yeah. Like this spiritual warfare and something that I need to come to a better realization of. No, this is actually happening and we can't see it. It's actual angels and demons. And this is what we believe as Catholics, actual angels and demons that are battling every single minute around us, within us.
Yeah.
And it is very real. And the church is not shy about that. There are things that are gray in the church. No, this is black and white. Demons exist, angels exist, and there are battles that are going on every minute.
I mean, there are forces at work in the world that are trying to like disallow you from knowing that. And it sounds like this almost sounds like conspiracy, but like it's not, where like the evil forces in the world are actively trying to get you not to believe in something like spiritual warfare. So this is what I want to ask you. Like, there was an article that came out in the Atlantic yesterday that had to do with the rosaries. Did you see that?
I did see that. Yeah.
So if you didn't see it, like I didn't read the entire thing. I got a pretty good idea of where it was going. And it was somebody, I forget who even wrote it, but essentially someone writing about how they were like detailing how praying the rosary is now associated with the extreme militant right in America, like politically. And like people who talk about praying the rosary or use terms like spiritual warfare are actually referring to preparing for militant violence and like actual warfare in the world. It's baffling that somebody could even come close to that conclusion when you talk about praying the rosary. But what is the rosary? Like, the rosary is, I forget if it was St. Padre Pio or St. Maximilian Kolbe, but one of those awesome saints said, like, the rosary is the weapon for our times because it is a weapon against these evil forces. It's a weapon of spiritual warfare to protect your own soul from being corrupted by the forces at work in this invisible world around us.
Right. And then I think there are parts of the article that encourage people to be offended by the rosary. Like, hey, listen, like, don't bust that thing out around me because you know what, I feel uncomfortable with that around.
Well, it's people think about, like, you know, people, I remember when I was in college and I was in the Catholic campus ministry, and like there was a Planned Parenthood clinic down the road, and our campus ministry would like take groups of students down there on, you know, weekday mornings or weekend mornings, and we would pray a rosary outside of it, not on the property, but on the sidewalk outside of the clinic. And we would see people driving into the parking lot and going in. Every once in a while, there would be somebody who wouldn't go in, and we didn't know if it was because of us or something, or, you know, just some personal thing they were going through. But like, that's the kind of stuff that unfortunately gets popularized in a really negative way in the media, where it's like these people are trying to prevent women from choosing their own, you know, paths forward and everything. And we're like, no, we're just praying for the souls of those babies. Yeah. Like whether the mothers go through with it, unfortunately, or whether they have a conversion of heart and choose not to go through with it that day, like whatever happens, we are praying for the souls of those children and for the mothers. Like, that's all we're doing. But like you said, like, it's like there's this encouragement for something like public faith and public prayer in the form of the rosary in this instance to be this horrible, evil thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, circling back to, you know, the initial conversation we were having, Satan, you know, just being the master of lies, invisible around us, very real. I mean, the rosary is, like you said, that's an amazing tool that we have at our disposal, which personally I need to use more. I know that I need to. If I'm doing one, maybe I should be doing two. I don't know, but like a day. But my question to you is, let's talk on a personal level. Take a step back from a cultural level. But what can we be doing, you and I? What can we be doing on a daily basis to help fight off Satan? I mean, I'll put it in very blunt terms, to fight off Satan, at least within our own lives personally. I mean, what would you say?
I'll put a disclaimer that I'm certainly not doing all of these things every single day.
I know, that's why I said we.
Right.
I said we, like, what do we need?
We can improve upon it. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, not you, listen. What do we need to do together, right? Or individually as well.
So I think the rosary is a great one. And the beautiful, awesome thing about the rosary, outside of the fact that in its entirety it is beautiful and awesome, is that it's like highly customizable. Like, there is a pattern to it. Like, you're going to do your Apostles' Creed, you're going to do your Our Fathers, your Hail Marys, you're going to do your mysteries, but like, it's not like an official, like, complete, you need to do the complete prayer every time you do it, like something like the Mass is. It's a devotion. It's a devotional prayer, meaning that, like, you are, you know, praying it out of the gratitude to God in your heart. So, and asking for the intercession of Mary. So like you can pray 1 decade of the rosary and that's all you do. And like, that's still praying the rosary. That's totally fine. You know, you do it like on your commute to work in the car or on the train or whatever. And you pray as much or as little as you can in that moment. But like calling upon our Blessed Mother to come and defend us. Like I think I was just to go back to another pop culture reference. Like I think about how in Harry Potter, which I don't think you're that into, right?
I've watched the first few.
Okay.
We have friends who I probably watch all of them 30 times over.
Me and my wife, we're very much into it.
No, yeah. I'm not judging. I just haven't.
Right.
I liked it.
I do think it's funny that like a lot of like Christian parents like were so against Harry Potter when it first came out. Oh, there were like book burnings. It was crazy because they thought it was like witchcraft. Oh, and okay. You know, I don't know if that's like something that's actually like a church thing, but I mean, people love like Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. And it's like in reality, like, yeah, there's no like witchcraft going on there, but is there a difference? But that's a whole nother episode we could get into.
I mean, Narnia. I mean, all of that, like that's.
Well, you know what it is? Because Tolkien was Catholic and C.S. Lewis was Christian apologist. So,
there you go.
But J.K. Rowling, not so much.
Okay.
But
yeah, fair enough.
She's pretty cool. But
yeah.
Anyway, in Harry Potter, like, how does Harry survive the attack from the most evil force on the planet with the most deadly spell?
Oh, listen, right? Spoiler alert. I haven't seen it yet.
Okay. Well, you're about, 23 years late on this one. But like, how does Harry survive that? This innocent child who was being attacked by the most deadly force with the most deadly spell that's supposed to kill you as soon as it makes contact with you. His father tried to defend him by stopping Voldemort, the evil guy. But then his mother laid down her life for her son by putting herself in front of him and protecting him from the evil that was coming at him. And now I'm getting all chills talking about it because like whether J.K. Rowling knew it or not, she was really doing an awesome depiction of how the Blessed Mother throws herself in front of Satan when he tries to get to us, and we call her into the fight. Like we call Mary in because we know that she is this awesome pure vessel that brought Christ into the world and Satan can't touch.
Right.
How amazing is that?
That's good, man. I haven't even seen it and I'm getting chills thinking about that. That is an amazing depiction.
Somebody tell J.K. Rowling about this.
Yeah. Send it over to her. Tag her.
Right.
Yeah, she's going to love it. No, dude, that's really good. But again, it's something this isn't fiction. This isn't like what we're talking about right now. Well, Harry Potter's fiction, but everything we're talking about now, like praying is very real. We talked about it in the last episode with Aaron, where, the culture is saying we don't need thoughts and prayers. We need action. It's like, hey, listen, we need both. Like, because prayers are very real and we don't know exactly what's happening, but you cannot deny that something is happening. So
absolutely. I
agree with you. I mean, the rosary is a huge tool, individually to fight off, the spiritual battles that are going on within us. I'll say, reconciliation. I think that's a big one. I think that's a big tool that I think is underutilized. And, going back to, inner demons, just like we were talking about Stranger Things before, these things that people hold inside of themselves, if they feel like they don't want to talk about it with other people, but they still feel this, the world on their shoulders and all this guilt, you either release it somehow, some way, in a healthy way, or you turn to other avenues that are extremely unhealthy, right? And we all do it. Like we're not all going to reconciliation every single week,
right?
But we all sin every single day.
Yeah, we should be going every week in a lot of ways.
That's what I'm saying. So, so we're holding on to all this sin, and if we don't release it in a proper way, which is, spoiler alert, reconciliation, then we're going to turn to things that are even more sins, and now we have a tendency as humans to just double down on all of that. But to be able to go to a priest and Jesus is acting through the priest to forgive our sins. I mean, that's not nothing. That's everything.
It's everything.
There. That's everything. Right,
it's literally going to the one person who has the power to get you out of the dark place you're in and saying, "This is the way that I have failed. Please, please forgive me." Like, please, and not just forgive me, but like welcome me back in the same way that you would welcome back like the person you love the most.
Right.
who ultimately, spoiler alert, is you
Yeah.
and me. Like you and me and everyone is the person that Jesus loves the most.
Right. And I mean, speaking of everything, the third tool, right? I mean, just being present with the Eucharist, going to mass, receiving the Eucharist. I mean, that's everything right there.
And receiving in a state of grace too.
Yeah.
Like we're talking about confession.
Pair
here.
those two things. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Like, I mean, and I, I'm not perfect by any means. I've received communion not in a state of grace many times in my life, unfortunately.
All of us have.
And every time I go to confession, I confess that, because it's like you said, like we have this tendency to double down. And like I've been in the pew on Sundays where I'm like, okay, I know I'm not supposed to receive communion if I haven't been to confession recently and if I am in a state of mortal sin. Like if I've done something mortally sinful and fully knew about it, I know I'm not supposed to receive confession, or I'm sorry, not receive confession. I'm not supposed to receive communion right now.
Before we receive confession.
And then the line starts for communion and you're sitting there and you say this line right beforehand where you say, Lord, I'm not worthy that you should enter under my roof, but only say the word and I shall be healed. And you kind of mentally say to yourself, I think you said the word. I think you said the word. I think I'm healed. I think I'm good. And then you go up in line and you receive, because like you don't want to be the socially weird person who either goes up and crosses the arms over the chest so that you're not receiving, or you stay in your pew. And like, I mean, especially if you're like with your family, they might look at you and they might ask questions like, oh, why didn't you receive? And then it's this whole weird conversation about, well, I'm in a state of mortal sin, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Or even worse, being on the inner side of the pew and having to stand up while 30 people pass you in the pew.
Oh, it's the worst.
So definitely don't want to be that guy. No, but again, we should be. We should be. And that's
normalize staying in the pew.
Yeah. But that's exactly it. And there's no shame in that. You're doing that for your own soul. Like we're doing that for our own soul, because we're saying at this point, Lord, I'm not worthy to receive you. And I'll say that there have been times that I've abstained from receiving, and oh my gosh, like we talk about like fire, like fire burning within me to get to reconciliation that week, because I know I'm not doing that 2 weeks in a row. Right. So, I mean, you want to light a fire within yourself, and just, if you feel like you're in the state of moral sin, abstain from receiving the Eucharist. It's not, ironically, it's not a sin to not receive it. You still participated in mass.
Your obligation.
You filled your obligation, right? It's the opposite. It is a sin to receive. If you're not in the state of grace. So at the end of the day, it's like we all, again, I'm right there with you. Like there are times I'm like, I should not be receiving today. And then the line starts to move. I'm like, okay, here I go. And then I ironically feel horrible about it, Yeah. So absolutely. You're like the two things we were talking about, receiving Eucharist, getting to confession, those two things hand in hand for sure.
Yeah. And you mentioned being present with the Eucharist. I mean, obviously we're talking about like adoration too, and like spending time physically with Christ for a period of time. Like if you have the opportunity to do that, like you're going to be in a much better, like, I think mental state, and obviously spiritual state, but I think even mental state where like, you're going to feel a lot more confident in your ability to avoid sin and coming out of something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have two other things that I would suggest as far as the spiritual warfare goes. Number one is praying one simple prayer, the prayer of St. Michael the Archangel.
Yeah, for sure.
Which used to be something that every priest would pray with the congregation after Mass up until Vatican II.
Probably.
Everything changed then, but like it's this pretty simple prayer of just asking Saint Michael, who is like the greatest warrior among the angels, right? Like kind of God's right hand, spiritual warrior, to do battle with Satan. That's what you ask Saint Michael to do, is to defend us from evil, like quite literally stop the demons from haunting our lives and invading our lives. And when you invoke him like that, it's a pretty powerful thing. Yeah. And I find myself like kind of quietly praying it to myself, like coming out of Mass or just in the car sometimes, like, because it's just something that should be a part of our daily lives, I think. And outside of that, as far as a daily life routine and prayer that I think keeps you grounded and keeps you in a space of holiness, is praying the Liturgy of the Hours, which is a series of prayers every day that is required for priests and for like religious brothers and maybe sisters too to pray. Usually consists of, I mean, technically there's like 9 parts to it every day that monks used to pray. And they would wake up at like 3 a.m. to do the first hour of it. But now it's mostly just morning, evening, and night prayer that, priests and other religious people are required to pray. But as lay people, we're encouraged to pray it along with the church. And I try to, like, I'm not perfect with it by any means, but I'm trying to at least do like one of them every day. Like when I wake up in the morning, I try to do morning prayer, or at night, I'll do night prayer. Usually kind of trying to fit one of those into the day. It's really just praying with the Psalms, which I think is really kind of poignant for what we're talking about here, and really kind of like on the mark, because like, what are the Psalms? Most of it is, I mean, it's all supposed to have been written by David, King David in ancient Israel. And like in most of them, it's him lamenting to God, like, God, like, what this horrible place that I'm in and this horrible state that I'm in, and I have these enemies all around me, and I have all these evil thoughts, and I've done all these evil actions, but ultimately I put my trust in you and I put my hope in you. A lot of his lamentations like that. So when you're praying it and you're kind of thinking about like this whole idea of spiritual warfare, it's so easy to put yourself into the shoes of David writing these Psalms. And it's supposed to be kind of like an everyman prayer where it's, God, this is this desperate situation that I'm in, and you're the only hope that I have. So I'm putting my hope in you.
Right. And we shouldn't be turning to him when he's our only hope. But there are times where that's exactly the case that we're in right now. I think that's a great place to wrap up. I mean, I think we discussed a lot of tools that we need to implement in both of our own lives there, like especially those last two. That's something I need to do a lot more. But we talked about it before, man. It comes down to recognizing that 2 persons exist, Satan and God. We need to recognize both of them. And
well, if we're getting theological about it, Satan's like a fallen angel, and God isn't necessarily. He's 3 persons in one entity of being God. So
thanks for downloading today's podcast. Available on Apple.
We can't have people thinking we're heretics up in here.
Fair enough. No, dude, that's why you keep me in check. Great job.
This isn't like a yin and yang situation. That's all I'm saying.
No, you're right. And it was this was a no, you kept me in check. Good job. Yeah. Semantics.
Satanics.
No.
Oh, no, not up in here.
Not up in here. But honestly, guys, thank you so much for downloading today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Check us out on our social media sites, facebook.com/justaparishioner, Instagram @justaparishioner as well. You can shoot us an email at weareparishioners@gmail.com.
Thank you guys so much for listening. Please pray for us. We're praying for you. Say a prayer for St. Michael, the archangel, for us. Appreciate it.
And just like Sean did, if I said anything else stupid, shoot us an email and let me know.
Yeah, please.
Thanks.
Carrying in myself.